April 8th, 1943. Way up there, 27,000 feet above Caen, France. Oberleutnant Ralph Hermican grinned beneath his oxygen mask. He couldn't hide it, really. There they were, clumsy shapes, laboring through the clear blue like newborn birds trying to fly. His Focke-Wulf 190A5 hummed steadily as he watched them approach. A veteran ace, battle-hardened, with 26 confirmed kills, Hermican studied them. The Americans. Their first taste of combat over Europe. "They've sent us flying milk bottles," he whispered to his wingman, barely holding back laughter. Below, 16 Republic P-47 Thunderbolts clawed their way upward, struggling like heavyweight wrestlers. Their 2,000-horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines groaned against a 7-ton frame. To Hermican and the others, trained on sleek Spitfires and nimble Soviet fighters, these rotund machines looked absurd. Barrel-shaped bodies with greenhouse cockpits. Wings that seemed too small for the bulk they carried. Propellers bigger than anything the Luftwaffe had ever flown. They looked like toys built for giants. But what Hermican didn't know, what none of the German pilots circling above, hunting like wolves, could ever imagine, was that they were witnessing the dawn of something far more dangerous. Within a year and a half, those flying milk bottles would go from being a joke to a nightmare. Their 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns would become the most feared sound in the skies. The mathematics of destruction had already been written into those broad wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition, a fire rate of 6,000 rounds per minute. Enough to shred a bomber in half before the enemy could blink. That morning marked the beginning of a new kind of war. Major Donald Belay of the 335th Fighter Squadron spotted the German formation lining up for attack. A former Eagle Squadron pilot, transferred from RAF Spitfires only weeks earlier, he saw what his men hadn't yet grasped. Survival would mean unlearning everything they thought they knew about air combat. The P-47 Thunderbolt wasn't built like anything before it. Where the Germans chased lightweight, nimble machines built for climbing and turning, Republic Aviation had designed something else entirely, something heavier, harder, something that would change the war. It was more than just a plane. It was a beast, an altitude juggernaut built from sheer mass, brute power, and firepower that rewrote the rules of aerial combat. That morning, the French sky was dotted with 56 American pilots, some of them just boys, barely old enough to shave. Pilots who would one day become legends, future aces whose names would haunt the dreams of Luftwaffe crews. But on April 8, 1943, they were still novices, flying an unproven machine against the deadliest, most experienced fighter force in the world. The Germans had been at war since 1939, battle-tested in Poland, France, Britain, Russia. The Americans? Combat experience, 0 days. This is the story of how raw industrial logic toppled tactical brilliance, of how quantity and quality fused into unstoppable power, how laughter on the German side turned to terror when they learned what synchronized Browning machine guns could do from just 400 yards away. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt wasn't born out of ambition. It was born out of panic. In June 1940, as German fighters tore through France, Republic Aviation's chief designer, Alexander Kartveli, a Georgian-born engineer, received desperate orders from the U.S. Army Air Corps. They wanted a high-altitude interceptor, one that could stand up to the Luftwaffe's finest. Kartveli didn't give them that. He built something far more monstrous. "It'll be a dinosaur," he told his team, "but a dinosaur with good proportions." When the XP-47B prototype first took to the skies on May 6, 1941, it shocked everyone. At 9,900 pounds empty, it was 65% heavier than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. Its massive turbo-supercharger system, with ducting snaking through the fuselage, gave it an almost pregnant look. Test pilots approaching it for the first time asked the same dumbfounded question. "This thing actually flies?" And not only did it fly, it soared like nothing else at high altitude. Its Pratt & Whitney R2800 double WASP engine, a monster with 18 cylinders pumping out 2,000 horsepower, could maintain full power at 27,000 feet, where German fighters gasped for air. Exhaust-driven turbocharging delivered sea-level performance in the thin, unforgiving stratosphere, where other machines faltered. At first, pilots hated it. Major Hubert "Hub" Zook of the 56th Fighter Group, training at Bridgeport, Connecticut, despised the aircraft. Between September 1942 and January 1943, his unit lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training accidents. The Thunderbolt had already killed more Americans in training than Germans would in its first months of combat. It ground-looped on landing, torque-rolled at takeoff, and dove with such reckless force that pilots suddenly discovered compressibility, controls freezing as shock waves built along the wings. But those who tamed it uncovered something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma who would become one of America's top aces with 27 confirmed victories, described his first flight like this. "It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it." Still, the first battles confirmed German assumptions. The P-47s couldn't turn with the agile Focke-Wulf 190. They couldn't climb with the Messerschmitt Bf 109s. Their handling at medium altitude left much to be desired. Luftwaffe pilots quickly devised tactics: attack from below where the Thunderbolts struggled, force them into turning fights where agility mattered more than brute firepower. After his first engagement, Hauptmann Joseph "Pips" Priller of JG-26, famed veteran and brother of ace Adolf Galland, reported back to headquarters without restraint. "The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter," he barked. "It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. Our boys are calling them Indiana, fat targets pretending to be warriors." Statistics seemed to confirm that confidence. In their first month of combat, the Americans lost 14 Thunderbolts for only 3 confirmed German kills. RAF observers, watching from their Spitfire squadrons, quietly suggested the Americans rethink their choice of mount. Some British pilots joked darkly that the best evasive maneuver in a P-47 was to unstrap and run around the roomy cockpit. But something strange was happening, something German intelligence failed to notice. The P-47s that went down had absorbed punishment that would have shattered any other aircraft. On a mission flown May 4th, one plane returned riddled with 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have torn a Messerschmitt or Spitfire apart. Its massive radial engine, lacking vulnerable coolant lines, shrugged off hits that would stop a liquid-cooled fighter in its tracks. And when Thunderbolts hit back, the results were devastating. Their weapons battery created a zone of destruction unlike anything the Germans had ever faced. Unlike earlier fighters with small-caliber guns and limited ammo, the P-47 could sustain fire for over 30 seconds, a lifetime in a dogfight. The turning point came on June 26, 1943, over Lazo, France. It involved Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron, and an encounter that would be remembered by both sides of the war. Johnson's formation, 48 Thunderbolts, was returning from escort duty when they were ambushed by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s from JG-26, led by Hedwig Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, younger brother of Ace Adolf Galland. The German attack was textbook perfect, diving from the sun with speed and surprise. Johnson's plane, at the rear of the formation, was caught in the crossfire and hit immediately. Within seconds, 20-millimeter shells exploded across his aircraft. The canopy shattered. Hydraulic fluids sprayed into the cockpit. The engine cowling tore away, and fire erupted behind his instrument panel. Shrapnel and bullet fragments tore into his nose and leg. He tried to bail out, but the canopy was jammed. A shell had welded it shut. Trapped inside a flaming wreck at 27,000 feet, with no visibility, a crippled engine, and controls responding only half the time, Johnson should have been dead, but he wasn't. At last, the pilot pulled alongside, shook his head in amazement, gave an informal salute, and peeled away, likely out of ammunition. Johnson's plane landed at Manston with its engine nearly dead. The crew chief stopped counting bullet holes after reaching 200. One shell had exploded inches from Johnson's head. Another had detonated against the armor plate behind his seat. The engine took direct hits. Control cables were shredded. 3 of 4 main structural spars were pierced, yet the aircraft held together and brought him home. The shockwaves spread fast. American engineers examining the wreck realized they had underestimated their own creation. German intelligence, reading reports from JG-26, refused to believe it at first. No aircraft could survive that much punishment, but testimony from multiple pilots confirmed the impossible. The Thunderbolt had taken everything the Luftwaffe could throw at it and lived. By July 1943, American pilots were beginning to understand the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert "Hub" Zook, commander of the 56th Fighter Group, had figured it out through painful trial and error. "Don't turn with them," he barked. "Don't climb with them at low altitude. Use your weight, use your power, use your guns." What once seemed a disadvantage, its size, its weight, became a weapon. In a dive, nothing could catch it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could hit 550 miles per hour, faster than any German fighter, even in a vertical plunge. That speed could be turned into altitude with a zoom climb that left pursuers floundering below. Captain Walker "Bud" Mahurin, who would become one of America's first aces in Europe, developed a tactic pilots nicknamed the boom and zoom, though many called it the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Instead of trading blows in traditional dogfights, Thunderbolt formations climbed to dizzying heights, higher than German fighters could follow. When the enemy appeared below, the Thunderbolts rolled inverted and dived, reaching speeds that rendered enemy aiming useless. At the bottom of the dive, their guns roared to life. German pilots later described it as flying into a wall of lead, an unbreakable storm of firepower. Aircraft caught in that deadly convergence didn't just fall, they disintegrated. The full power of the American weapon was revealed on August 17, 1943, during the deep raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg. It was the farthest penetration into German territory attempted up to that point. The mission would expose both the P-47's limits and its terrifying effectiveness when used right. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd. April 1943. A formation of Messerschmitt Bf-110 destroyers crept into position, heavy with cannon and rocket armament, ready to tear into B-17 bombers below. These twin-engine beasts, slow but heavily armed, were the Luftwaffe's specialists, bomber killers. But then came Schilling's flight of 4 P-47 Thunderbolts, rolling into a dive from 28,000 feet like steel hammers falling from the heavens. The American fighters came down like judgment, later recounted Unteroffizier Hinrich Roth, a gunner lucky enough to survive. I opened fire at 800 meters. Good hits. I saw them tear into the wing. But the P-47 didn't even wobble. Then it fired. The aircraft ahead. It didn't crash. It exploded. Wings ripped apart. Tail torn loose. The crew shredded into metal confetti. 2 seconds. That's all it took. 8 Bf-110s destroyed in less than a minute. No one in the Luftwaffe had ever faced such concentrated firepower. Each Thunderbolt carried 425 rounds per gun, 3,400 rounds total, nearly 900 pounds of ammunition. All 8 guns converged at 300 yards, a 6-foot zone of death, firing 100-inch projectiles every second at speeds exceeding 2,900 feet per second. While German fighters struggled with barely 120 rounds per cannon, American pilots could unleash sustained fire for half a minute, mixing armor-piercing and incendiary rounds to destroy and ignite targets alike. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, America's top ace in Europe, once said it plainly, "When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode." I watched a Messerschmitt 109 cut clean in half, the tail falling one way, the nose another. The pilot never even knew what hit him. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe discovered something even more terrifying. The P-47's performance improved with altitude. Where German fighters gasped for air above 25,000 feet, the turbocharged double-wasp engine of the Thunderbolt kept delivering full power up to 30,000 feet. Oberlieutenant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's deadliest aces with 206 kills, encountered this reality and paid for it with his life. Over Bremond on October 8, 1943, leading his wing against B-17 at 28,000 feet, his Focke-Wulf 190 became sluggish in the thin air. The BMW 801 engine, once powerful, gasped for oxygen miles above Earth. When P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group dove from 32,000 feet, the German fighters became sitting ducks. Robert Johnson, now on the path to ace status, spotted Phillips' plane at 31,000 feet. "Open fire at 300 yards, 30-degree deflection," he noted clinically. "Observed strikes. Aircraft exploded. No parachute." The death of Hans Philipp sent shockwaves across the Luftwaffe. If one of their best, survivor of 500 missions, couldn't survive against the Thunderbolt, what chance did ordinary pilots have? An immediate investigation followed. The report, delivered to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring in November 1943, left no doubt. The Thunderbolt's service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter. Its dive speed neared the sound barrier. Armor plates shielded the pilot, the windshield, even the engine. Its rugged frame could absorb damage that would destroy 3 conventional fighters, and still return home. By January 1944, the P-47 D-22 arrived in England, finishing its transformation from laughingstock to nightmare. A Hamilton standard hydroelectric propeller with 13-foot paddle blades bit into the air like giant oars. Climb rates soared from 2,200 feet per minute to 3,000, matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. Acceleration improved, energy built faster, and German dogfighters found themselves outmatched. Veteran Hedman Heinz Nocker wrote after one engagement near Hanover in February 1944, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced them, expecting an easy kill. But they turned into us, climbed with us, followed us to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was blown apart. Nothing left but smoke. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." That paddle blade propeller did more than climb. It thundered. Supersonic tips created a roar miles away, chilling German troops. They began calling it Donnerschlag, the thunderclap of death. By March 1944, the Thunderbolts carried external fuel tanks, two 108-gallon wing tanks, or a 75-gallon belly tank, extending their range over 1,000 miles. After dropping tanks, they climbed back into combat without losing performance. The Luftwaffe's response? Concentrate on bombers, hoping to inflict enough damage to stop the daylight raids. But reaching the landing zones meant flying through P-47 escort screens, suicide missions. German pilots developed a grudging respect that bordered on fear. Major G.A. Rahl, Germany's top ace with 275 victories, survived a March 6, 1944 encounter but was badly wounded. Later he recalled, "We saw them against the sun, fat silhouettes. Someone laughed, 'Here come the flying pigs.' Nobody laughed 30 seconds later. They came like an avalanche, faster than we could react. 3 of our fighters gone in the first pass, just burning wreckage. Their guns didn't fire in bursts. They poured fire like liquid death. If you got caught in that stream, you were gone." Endurance became another P-47 advantage. Where German fighters drained fuel at max power, the Thunderbolt cruised efficiently for hours, rotating top cover, staying combat ready. As P-51 Mustangs arrived in 1944, P-47 units pivoted to ground attack, becoming the most feared force in the German arsenal. April 1944 marked the turning point. With D-Day looming, the Thunderbolt's guns tore into tanks, vehicles, and bunkers. A 2-second burst could shower a truck-sized target with 160 half-inch projectiles. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds penetrated tanks' tops, while sheer volume obliterated soft targets in seconds. The D-25 variant carried 2 1,000-pound bombs and a 500-pound bomb under the fuselage, equal to early war medium bombers. Later models launched high-velocity rockets, equivalent to artillery shells. Oberstleutnant Hans von Luck, defending during the Normandy campaign, described a low-altitude P-47 strike. "They flew so low we saw their faces, engines roaring, rockets screaming. Then the machine guns hammered us. 20 trucks turned into burning wrecks in one pass. The men were terrified. They called them jabos, fighter bombers, but these were something worse. Flying artillery, deadly snipers from the sky." On June 6, 1944, during D-Day, over 500 P-47s cloaked the beaches in an impenetrable shield. German fighters were massacred trying to break through. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches, later recalled, "The sky belonged to the Americans. 12 fighters tried at dawn. I was the only one to return. The Thunderbolts waited at every altitude. Their guns turned us into aluminum rain." In the weeks after D-Day, the statistics became staggering. In June alone, 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks, and thousands of vehicles were destroyed, all by Thunderbolts. The Wehrmacht was forced to move at night, crippling its response. The Germans tried everything: reinforced armor, more anti-aircraft guns, camouflage, but nothing worked. The P-47's speed, armor, and firepower made it nearly unstoppable. Even the feared 88mm flak guns struggled to track it at low altitude. And while Europe burned, the Pacific theater told the same story. From New Guinea, Colonel Neil Kirby led P-47s against Japanese fighters unused to their firepower and durability. On October 11, 1943, he shot down 6 planes in one mission, earning the Medal of Honor. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai later wrote, "We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannon that could destroy a P-40 with a few hits seemed useless. I poured rounds into one Thunderbolt. It flew away untouched." The P-47N, with wet wings holding 93 gallons each, extended its range to 2,350 miles, escorting bombers deep into Japan. The ultimate test came when German jet fighters appeared. The Me-262, faster than any propeller plane, seemed untouchable, unless caught at takeoff, landing, or diving from altitude. On November 27, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Meare became one of the first to shoot one down, reaching nearly 500 miles per hour in a dive from 28,000 feet. The jet pilot never saw him until it was too late. By early 1945, P-47M variants were outfitted with water methanol injection and refined aerodynamics, reaching speeds that could intercept jets under certain conditions. Major George Bostwick, leading the 63rd Fighter Squadron, shot down 2 jets in one mission. His report summed it up. "The jets are faster, but they can't turn, and they can't take punishment. One good burst, and they come apart like paper." Operation Bodenplatte, launched on January 1, 1945, was Germany's last desperate attempt to destroy Allied air power. Nearly 900 fighters attacked Allied airfields across Europe, destroying dozens of aircraft on the ground. But Major George Brooking at the Metz airfield famously replied, pointing to the crews already repairing planes, "By tomorrow, we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots? Within 2 days." New P-47s rolled out, the Luftwaffe's irreplaceable pilots gone. The numbers were staggering. 15,683 Thunderbolts built, more than any other fighter. Factories churned out one every hour, around the clock. Each craft required thousands of precision parts, miles of wiring, tons of aluminum and rubber, all assembled by workers, many of them women, new to aviation. Ammunition plants produced millions of rounds monthly. Fuel tanks poured tens of millions of gallons across the Atlantic. And pilot training programs graduated tens of thousands every year, each more skilled than Germany's entire air force could field. By war's end, the Luftwaffe was a ghost. Cratered runways, dead pilots, and aircraft grounded by shortages. The few remaining German pilots, when confronted with Thunderbolts, faced near certain death. The sound of the P-47 became synonymous with doom. Ground troops panicked at the approaching roar. Even hardened veterans broke under stress. Medical reports called it Jabbo fever, a terror that gripped nerves before a mission even began. In Europe alone, over 3,000 aircraft were destroyed, tens of thousands of vehicles and locomotives shattered, and hundreds of thousands of enemy forces crippled. All thanks to the P-47. The final word came from none other than General Adolf Galland, former head of the Luftwaffe fighter force. In 1985, at a reunion with former American foes, he admitted on camera, "We made a terrible mistake. We saw it and laughed. We thought they didn't understand air combat, but they built a plane around production, firepower, and survivability. They understood that a war of attrition would favor the aircraft that could take punishment and strike back harder." They were right. I flew one after the war, and I knew we never stood a chance. The P-47 Thunderbolt, once mocked as a fat, slow beast, became the instrument that shattered the Luftwaffe and rewrote aerial warfare. Its guns were called Roosevelt's piano, their song unforgettable. They didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe, they annihilated it. By May 1945, there were no German pilots left to laugh. The thunder had spoken, and the skies belonged to America. And that is the story of how one aircraft changed the course of history. How courage, engineering, and determination came together to turn the tide of war. It's incredible how something that was once laughed at became a legend that reshaped the skies. If you enjoyed this journey, if you love stories that bring history to life, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll never miss another adventure, another story, another piece of the past waiting to be discovered. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.